The topic of explaining Yitzock's foulness of Esau and the meaning of Vayigdalu Hana'orim. Given Tafshim and press 1.
Speak further. We have blessings. And every aliyah, everyone who recites the brachas by the Sefer Torah, there's a bracha for every one of them. So the Kohen, so we read for him, Hashem said to Yitzock, I will bless you. Then starts Shani, and we call up the Levi, and we read about the blessing that Yitzchak received. By Yitzchak ba'arasahi, Yitzchak planted here. Vayivarachehu Hashem, Hashem blessed. Then we call up Shlishi. In Shlishi, we do not have the word bracha. We do not have the word bracha. The Feirish, it isn't spelled out there as a bracha. But we do have a very profound bracha. Vayayinu, Ki ata hechav Hashem lanu, Rabbeinu Shloim has given us wideness. It means He has blessed us with spaciousness. Ufarinu ba'aretz, and we shall prosper in the land. This is the blessing. The Vili, Rabbeinu Shloim says, Atzira, Yitcha anoichi v'eirachticha, I will bless you. And the Vili finishes off, Ata Baruch Hashem, you are blessed. In Chamishi. So we have that Yitzchak told Esau, bring me the delicacies, Bavo Tivarecha Nafshi, so that I shall bless you. And Chamishi finishes off that Vayerech Esayach Begadas. Yitzchak was aware that the son of Gan Eden came in with Yaakov, Vayivarachehu, and he blessed. In Shishi, we have the blessing. The Yitna L'chol Alekem L'chol Shmeina Mishmana Ya'aretz. And it finishes off in L'varachecha Baruch. Those who bless you are blessed. That's in Shishi. In Shviyi, we have Vayar Esau Ki Beirach Yitzchak es Yaakov. That Yitzchak blessed Yaakov. So every one of them, every aliyah today in Parsha Toldos has a blessing. And Toldos is the sixth settlement. This is sixth settlement. The number 6 is related to blessing at all times. And the number 6 is a blessed number, and it has a shaykhus to blessing. And wherever there's blessing involved, we very often find it in terms of 6. Like when the Jews were blessed in Mitzrayim with an abundance of children, they had 6 children at a time. Blessing is 6. The 6th of the Ushpizin is Yosef. And Yosef is the one whose blessing is doubled. He has 2 shvatim come out of him rather than 1, like all the other shvatim. In fact, the root of the word blessing, Baruch, to bless is always a doubling, because Aleph means one. Base is a doubling. Base is two. In other words, from one, we have two. A chaf is also the same thing, except that it's in 2 digits. Chaf is 20. A reish is also the same thing, except that it's in 3 digits. A reish is 200. So Bareich, the bless, is 2, and 20, and 200. This is the root of the word bracha, to bless. And Yosef had that. He has 2 shvatim rather than 1. And he is a blessing. And therefore, it is by Hasidim, it's accepted that the most important aliyah, which they usually give the Rabbanim or the Rebbes, is Shishi, the 6th aliyah, because that's the aliyah of blessing. And those of you who spent some Chassair and Avodas Yisrael probably have noticed that the Hakasa on which we put more emphasis on than any other Hakasa is the 6th Hakasa. That's when all the simcha, the dancing, and the jolly, that's all during the 6th Hakasa. Because the 6th contains blessing. And Toldos, being the 6th Hakasa, the 6th Sedra, refers to blessing of children, and the name of the Sedra is Toldos, children. And so every aliyah has a blessing here. I've counted how many times we have the word bracha, or bareich, or any word which comes from the root of bracha in Toldos, and there are 32, which is an enormous number for one Sedra. The whole Sedra is just full of blessing. And when we are approaching this Shabbos Parsha, Toldos, we should endeavor to make ourselves a receptacle fitting for the blessing of the Sedra, the blessings of the Sedra. You know, sometimes a person can take in a lot of himself and he has nothing because he has a hole in the stocking. So, for the acceptance of brachas, we need shleimus. There should be no hole. It should be complete. And therefore, the last bracha of Shemini Esrei, of the 18 brachas, is shalom. Because shalom is a keli. That's how the last Mishnah in Mishnayos ends off. The keli, the receptacle which contains bracha, is shalom. So therefore, after all the brachas, the last bracha is shalom. And in Birchas Kayanim also, Yivrachach Hashem Yisrael, and the last word in Birchas Kayanim is also shalom. So we should pray. This is something which Klal Yisrael needs today. In this Parshas Toldos, we should pray to Hashem that should be shalom among the last week. We started talking about Emunah. I was going to continue. However, I decided that I'm going to put this on hold and wait until the Sedras that relate more to Emunah will come, like the Sedras of Yitzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah. That's where we can actually find it in the Sedra. So in this big Sedra, we have in the beginning that Yitzock had 2 children, Yankov and Esau, and Esau was different than Yankov. But he Esau this year, they had Sayyid this Esau was a street person, a woods person. He went hunting in the woods. And Yankov was Yoshe Lehala. Started the Smadrish and and for some reason, Yitzock was more fond of Esau. Vayehav Yitzock as Esau Yitzayit the fifth. Yitzock loved Esau. He was fond of Esau. Yitzayit the fifth was hunting in his mouth, and Parsha says Yitzayit the fifth means that he deceived his father, just like a hunter tricks an animal into the net, into the trap. So, Sayyid the fifth, he just like hunted his father and got him into his net. And the uncle says, Yitzayit the fifth, that I need say they have the achim. Because why was Yitzchak fond of Esau? He would say they are the Yochel because he ate from his hunting. Esau went hunting and he brought venison or whatever it was to Yitzchak for his food, and Yitzchak enjoyed that food, and therefore he was very fond of Esau. And well, that's difficult to understand. That Yitzchak, if his word Yitzchak, should be fond of Esau and give him preference over Yankov because he brings him a steak. I can't buy it. No, I can't accept it. And so what does Uncle mean with Yitzchak? And what does it mean that Esau manipulated Yitzchak, according to Rashi's chat, he manipulated Yitzchak, and he hunted him. Yitzchak certainly is such a great tzaddik and such a great guy and Kodesh. He can't be deceived by people like Esau. It would be very underestimating it would be a gross underestimation of Yitzchak that Esau would be able to manipulate. Just like a hunter manipulates the animal and tricks it into the trap. And the same thing we have was when Yankov received the brachas from Yitzock. So Yitzock tells Esau, go out in the woods and hunt me a hunting so that I will eat and enjoy and I will bless you. And you can't bless without eating and enjoying first. And this was the reward of Esau, because you gave me a good dish to enjoy. That's why you received the brachas in favor of Yankov, the real, true tzaddik.
How much do you think this smartphone cost?
So we see a repetition of the same thing by the brachas. The bicycle refers back
from the design. You would think it's around 200,000 naira and above.
In the beginning of the Seder, Yankov receives the Bechayra, the benefits of being firstborn. started off Esau for bread and a plate of lentils, cooked lentils. And what happened was that day, Avraham Avinu was nifter. Avraham Avinu died that day, like the Medrash and Rashi tell us. And Avraham Avinu, being that he passed away that day, and it's customary that the first meal which the mourners eat is not from their own home. Somebody brings them. So therefore, Yankov brought Yitzock something to eat. And it's customary that this particular food, which is prepared for the mourner, is something which has the character of mourning. So he brought in lentils which are round, something which is round relates to mourning. And that's why by the Seder dish we have the egg, the round egg, because we mourn about the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Because whenever, on whichever day of the week, the first day of Pesach falls, that's when Tisha B'Av will fall. Like last year, when it was on Shabbos, the first day of Pesach was Shabbos, so Tisha B'Av also came out of Shabbos. And of course, we pushed it off for Sunday, because on Shabbos we don't fast. But that's why we eat egg, and we have it on the Seder dish. So this is the kind of food that Yankov prepared for his grandfather's morning time. This was the first seudah, the first meal that Yitzock ate. And Esau came from the field, he was hungry, he was starving. But Rashi says that Ayef designates, Ayef means that he did 5 Averos that day. Among his Averos was murder. He killed Nimrod because he coveted the suit which Nimrod was wearing, which was the suit which Hashem has made for Adam and Isha when he needed clothing. He asked Hashem, and this was a suit of clothing that Nimrod was wearing, and Esau wanted that because it would have helped him in attracting the animals to himself. It was a very enticing suit, so it would make his hunting more easy. And he killed Nimrod, and for that reason. So, besides, that day, Esau expressed his disbelief in Chias HaMeisim, that the dead will arise when the time comes and will become alive again. And this is one of the 13 ikrim, the 13 roots of belief, and which we recite on Sefer Torah, if you remember. And the last one is Ani Mamed Amunah Shleima. I believe with a perfect faith, the Chias HaMeisim, that the dead will arise alive. And Esau, and that day, has expressed, has declared his disbelief in this ikar, this root of belief. He said, I'm going to die, that's going to be the end, the absolute end, and I don't need the tchayil. I won't get up alive again and utilize this tchayil. So, which rendered Esau an apikairos. An apikairos means one who doesn't believe in any of the certain principles of faith, the Yud Gimel Ikrim. And the Atakayavis is one that if he touches wine, we can't drink that wine. Like a guy. If he shechts, if he slaughters an animal, even if everything would be according to the ritual, according to the halachas of shechita, we can't eat that animal. It's safe. So this happened on when both these Yankov and Esau were boys. So I'm wondering, how is it possible that all these years Esau went hunting and brought meat for Yitzock, and Yitzock ate that meat? Even if Esau would have shechted it with all the dinim necessary for shechita, still it's nevayim. Again, let's go back to the beginning of the Seder. And Esau came, and he was starving, and he said, I'll be tiny none in the other mother. Let me partake of this red food, this lentil soup that you have prepared. And Yankov gave it to him in exchange for the prayer. So the pasuk says, "Vayigdalu ha'na'arim." The boys grew up. Vayig Esau v'shidei atzayid dishtzada. Yankov ishtam yeshav v'chala. So why does it say the boys grew up? The Parsha says that as long as they were small, no one paid attention to their traits, to their characteristics, whether one is a tzaddik, one is a rasha. They're small boys. But when they grew up, the Parsha says when they became 13 years old, which means they grew up, they became gedolim. It was very evident that's the day when the Yitzock comes into a person. Yankov made his way to the Beis HaMedrash to learn Torah. There's that Pirish, Rabbi Dazara, and Esau went to the Rabbi Dazara to the field. Now, so Rashi says that Yigdal Anara means when they became 13 years old, which is very difficult. This is contradicted by a little arithmetic in the Parsha, like the Wolfson make us aware of that. According to the Cheshbon, if that was the day that Avraham Avinu passed away, so they were definitely 15 years old, not 30. Couldn't be. So I go into the arithmetic very briefly that Avraham Avinu was 100 years old when Yitzock was born, and Yitzock was 60 years old. It says in today's Seder, the Yitzock ben Shishin Shana Baladasai, and the Pasuk tells us that when Avraham Avinu was 100 years old, Yitzock was born. The Pasuk tells us that when Yankov and Esau was born, when these two twins were born, Yitzock was 60, which makes Avraham Avinu 160 years old. Now, 13 years later, when these boys became bar mitzvah, that means Avraham Avinu was 173 years old. But the Parsha tells us that when Avraham Avinu passed away, he was 175 years old. So that means that they were 15. Why does Rashi say that they were 30? So therefore, some Mepharshim have it that there's a misprint here in the Rashi. It's supposed to be the late Tezvav Shana when they were 15 years old. But that's difficult to understand. If they were 15 years old, and it's really a misprint, so why does the Pasuk say the boys became Gedolim, the boys grew up? Because Agadol, one becomes when he's 13 years old, not when he's 50. In Malachim, we have that Hanavi had a Talmud, Elisha. And Elisha requested from his Rebbe, from Eliyahu Hanavi, that he wants to have double the spirit, double the Ruach HaKodesh of Eliyahu. I want to be double as you are. So Eliyahu Hanavi told him, if you are going to be fortunate to see me taken away from you, then you will have that. What I'm wondering is, if I have $100, you can ask me for $100. But if I have but $100, you can't ask me for $200. I can't give you what I haven't got. So if Eliyahu Hanavi is as big as he is, and Elisha says, I want to be, please grant me, I should be double what you are. How can Eliyahu Hanavi give him what he hasn't got himself? And actually, and why did he answer him, if you're going to see me taken away from you? And so it happened. That day that Eliyahu Hanavi was taken away from earth, and he rose like an angel to the heavens in a chariot and horses of fire, Elisha looked on, and he became twice Eliyahu Hanavi. And whatever feats of prophecy or miracles we find by Eliyahu Hanavi, we find exactly double that amount by Elisha. Why? Why was not Eliyahu Hanavi able to give him to fulfill his request only on the day when he passes up? And why yes? Now the idea is like this. Moshe Rabbeinu said on the day of his passing away, said, I am 120 years old. So the Wolfson, the Sfarim explained, the idea of the Kala, the Esau explains that in the day of a person's death, all his days come back to him. We look at time as a certain way of measuring things, of measuring what happens in time. Time is a b'riyah. Time is a creation. Time isn't something which is abstract. Time is a creation. Reish is bara l'kender. Banishlan created time. And every day a new day comes down. That day goes up in heaven at the end of the day. And the new day comes down for each person, the Zayar Kaddish tells us that. And whatever a person does on that day is inscribed on that day. At the end of the day, that day goes up. And therefore, if a person did something wrong during the day, it's easier for him to do tshuva at night, just before he goes to sleep, like Kriyash Meshal Amita, before the day goes up, because once it goes up, it'll be hard for him to get it down and erase what was inscribed on it and make amends. So, at the end of the week goes up. At the end of the year goes up. And before the end of the week, Erev Shabbos, before the end of the year, Erev Rosh Hashanah, there's a time for tshuva. Erev Rosh Chodesh, so the Zayar says that when Avraham Avinu became old, all his days were complete. There wasn't one day which was not the Seder, which wasn't as it should be. The Avraham came, when Avraham became old, the Zayar says, he came with all his days. All his days were complete. Every day was inscribed with mitzvahs and ma'asim without aveiros. So when a person is niftar, just before his neshama passes out, all the days down to him, and they welcome him, and they escort him up to where he's supposed to go. That's what the Zohar tells. So therefore, that day when Moshe Rabbeinu was niftar, he said, today I have all my 120 years. So that's why he was so great on that day. On that day, the Pasuk says, Moshe, the man of God, the godly man. That distinction is never given to him except on that day. Esau, the godly man. Because that day he was very great. So when Eli Hanavi in his normal days was as big as he is on that day, but on the day when Eli Hanavi passes up in the fiery chariots with the fiery horses, on that day he's much, much bigger, because then all the days come to welcome him and escort him up above. So on that day, he could give Elisha twice of what he normally is, because he's much more than that on that day. In the brachas from Sefer, the brachas, which the Chasam Sefer said for his congregation, so there is a hesped, there's a lamentation on the passing away of the Chasam Sefer's Rebbe, the Benassan Adler, who was a very, very great holy man. And the Chasam Sefer is sorry. He grieves the fact that he was not Zoiche, he didn't have the fortune to be at his Rebbe's bedside when he passed away. So some Sefer writes, if I would have been at my Rebbe's bedside, I would have been twice him. Just like Elisha and Eliyahu. He was a very devoted prophet, and he would have been Zoiche for that. Now, the Gemara says in Chagiga, Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, one of the great Tanoim, usually had debates with the priests, with the Galachim, debates in faith issues, and he always came out superior. And he was very good at it. They tried to bring out the fact that the Jewish faith is lacking, and that you have to believe like the Goyim did, and he always came out the victor in the debate. Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya was about to die, and his Talmidim were weeping. Rabbi, what's going to be when the Goyim are going to come to debate with us? Who is going to take them on? There's no replacement for you, Rabbi. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya said, don't worry. Don't worry. The Pasuk says that when Yankov met Esau in Vayishlach, I'm going to go towards you, Negdecha. And the Gemara says, so Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya explains, that means that the tzaddik always has a counterpart, which is his opposition, a balanced opposition. If there is a big tzaddik in a given generation, there is a rasha who is his match in that same generation. If he's a smaller tzaddik, the match will also be a smaller one. But every tzaddik has his distinct opposition, somebody who's the exact opposite of him, somebody who opposes him, somebody who battles him. No tzaddik has a picnic in this world. It's a life of struggle. He has to struggle against the opposing rasha, who is his balance. He keeps the scale balanced, so that there should be an even feel, an even choice between good and bad. So Rabbi Tanya says, don't worry, if I'm going to go away, they also are going to lose their prowess. And they are going to be a match only for those who are available to oppose them. So, every tzaddik has his opposing enemy whose platform is the exact opposite of that tzaddik's. Avraham Avinu was certainly in his days the greatest tzaddik on earth. He had his opposing enemy who preached from a platform whose platform was the exact opposite of Avraham Avinu. His arch enemy, that was Nimrod. Avraham Avinu preached that there is one God. Nimrod said, no, I am God. Avraham Avinu went around all over, and he made it his business not to keep his emunah, his faith to himself, but he went from place to place, and he spread that belief. Nimrod did the opposite. Nimrod went all around spreading disbelief in Hashem. And Chazal tell us that's why it's called Nimrod. Nimrod comes from the word mered, rebellion. He made it his business in life to spread rebellion against the Rabbeinu Shalom, against the King of all kings. And so the opposing enemy, the antagonist of Avraham Avinu in this time was Nimrod. And I was said to see a very interesting thing, that on the day that Avraham Avinu was niftar, on that same day Nimrod was killed. Because if Avraham Avinu isn't there, then Nimrod has no more place on earth either. There has to be a balance of the Rasha not bigger than the tzaddik. Yaakov Avinu, in his days, he certainly was the biggest tzaddik. Who was the counterpart in Tumah against the Kedusha of Yaakov? Definitely Esau. His brother, yeah. The entire life of Yaakov was a battle against Esau. And when Yaakov was niftar, he was still on earth, but because it took 70 days to bring him from Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael to inter him in the Moras HaMachpelah. And, well, that's the day that he left earth. On that same day, Esau was killed. Like the Gemara tells us to say, that when they were about to bury Yaakov, Esau came, and he says, half of the Moras HaMachpelah belongs to me. So he told him, look, but you sold it to our father, because Yaakov gave Esau riches to buy off his part in Moras HaMachpelah. Esau denied it. So Naphtali, who was a very swift runner, ran to Mitzrayim to get the deed, to get the contract where Esau signed that he's selling his portion of the Moras HaMachpelah. And they waited for him to come back. And Chushan, the son of Dan, the Gemara tells us in Saita, said, why are we waiting here? So they told them, because we're waiting for the contract. And Esau is keeping up the works. Oh yeah? So Chushan ben Dan took his sword and just chopped off Esau's head, and the head rolled down into the Moras HaMachpelah. So that same day when Yaakov left this earth, that same day Esau went away. If Yaakov isn't here, there's no place for Esau on earth, because there has to be a balance. So it was that day that Avraham Avinu was niftar, that Esau had to leave the scene. That Nimrod had to leave the scene. And who killed him? Esau. And where was Yaakov at that time? The whole family was around the bedside of Avraham Avinu, who was preparing to leave, and he said his last words to his family, and Yaakov was there. Being that was the last day of Avraham Avinu, all the Baba Yomim, all the great holy full days of Avodas Hashem, of worshiping Hashem, came down. 175 complete years. They were all in that room. They came to welcome and take along Avraham Avinu to his place. There was a sphere of utmost kedusha, terrific kedusha, much more than what Avraham Avinu experienced in any normal day. Whoever was in that room, and he was susceptible to that kedusha, certainly absorbed a lot. Just like Elisha absorbed in the day when his Rebbe Eliyahu went up. So Yaakov became very great in kedusha that day. Let's move on and change the scene. That same day, we find Esau chopping off Nimrod's head. And what happened? Nimrod died. Who came to welcome the neshama of Nimrod? All these black, filthy malachim that were created by his Avedas, hordes and hordes of them. They all came to grab Nimrod and inflict upon him all punishments that he deserved. And it was that terrible. And there was so much tumor here. Of all the Avedas that Esau did, that Nimrod did, all during the years of his life, starting off with the Daya HaFlag and all the way down. And there was a awful atmosphere of tumor, and when the dead Nimrod was lying on the ground. And who is susceptible to this tumor? Who is magnetic to this tumor? A person like Esau. So he absorbed all that tumor, and he became a profound Rasha at that day, much more than he ever was. So that was the birthday present of these two boys. Yaakov became a profound tzaddik at that day, because he was at the bedside of the dying, of the departing Yitzock. And Esau became a profound Rasha at that day, because he was at the graveside of the dead Nimrod, whom he killed. That's what the Pasuk says. By Yigdalu and the Arnon, both became big that day. They were 15 years old, but they became big that day. Esau became big in awful cruelty, sin, tumor. He had a defiled nefesh that day, and Yaakov absorbed so much kedusha, so much dahava at that day. So it was on that day that Yaakov said, being Esau, my brother, that you are so tummy today. Well, brother Esau, what do you need your chayah? Today was a very momentous day for both of us. This day is a landmark in our lives. And according to what this day produced for both of us, you have no business bearing the chayah. What do you need it for? So Yaakov said, Michra kayaylas b'cheras v'li. Kayayim, sow me according to the very nature of this day. The day. This day that dictates that you shouldn't have the b'chayra, and you should say, so it's to me. So that's what happened to them. There are two philosophies in life. The philosophy of the tzaddik and the philosophy of the rasha. The philosophy of the tzaddik is expressed in the pasuk, philosophy of the tzaddik is expressed in the pasuk, Asher Anochi Mitzava Eschem Hayom La'asayisem. The Rebbeinu Shalom commands you this day, Hayom, today, La'asayisem, to do today you do the mitzvahs, and tomorrow you will accept the reward for the mitzvahs in the world to come. There is the Hayom and the Bracha, the today and the tomorrow. For the tzaddik, today means to do mitzvahs. Tomorrow means to be rewarded for the mitzvahs. That's the philosophy of the tzaddik. The philosophy of the rasha is like the Navi puts it. Let's eat and drink today because tomorrow we're going to die. Let's enjoy it while we last. They don't care about the tomorrow. They don't believe in the tomorrow. So therefore, this is what Yankov told Esau. We have two different philosophies. We have opposing philosophies in the Hayom. I believe that today we do mitzvahs and tomorrow we get schal. We get the reward. So mitzvah Hayom, according to my philosophy of Hayom, which is Hayom La'asayisem U'Lamacha L'Kabel Scharim, as opposed to your philosophy, which is eat and drink today, indulge, enjoy, Kimacha Namas, because tomorrow we're going to be dead, and that's going to be the end of it. So according to this philosophy, you don't need the b'chayr and I need it. So Esau said, yeah, that's right. Wow, you're right. I believe that I'm going to die, and he expresses disbelief in Tchias HaMeisim. Well, according to my philosophy, I don't need the b'chayr. So Esau was the rasha. And let's jump and skip over quite a number of years. And Esau was instructed by Yitzock, go and get me good food, go hunting, bring me good food, and I will give you the blessing. But tzaddik isn't particularly interested in good food. Not because the tzaddik doesn't enjoy life. The tzaddik enjoys life. He relishes every moment of life because he knows that life is so good and dear and sweet. He can learn Torah and feel the Kihen Chayenu v'Yerech Yameinu. He can feel the sweetness of Torah, of mitzvahs. He enjoys it so much. The tzaddik enjoys life. He enjoys a mitzvah. And when he eats, he doesn't really, I'm speaking about the real tzaddikim, not by ordinary people like you and I. I'm speaking about the real great tzaddikim. So when he eats, he doesn't even hear or doesn't take notice of the taste of the food. He measures food. He measures how palatable food is by how much kedusha there is in that food, and he knows how to feel it. It's a very famous story that the Moshe, that's the great grandfather of the previous Satmar. His Rebbetzin, his wife, had to go away in a certain night to a chasna or whatever, and she told her husband, maybe you can do me a favor and serve yourself supper. I'm going to be away. Well, sure, why not? So she said the pot will be on the oven. So the pot of food was on the oven. And also on the same oven, there was a dirty pot with some soap water and suds in it, of course, kosher soap. And which she left there so that it should soften down the dirt so that it should be able to be cleaned easier later. The Moshe, he made a mistake. He took the wrong pot and warmed it out and served himself a plate of suddy water and soap. And he ate that for supper. His wife comes back, no, did you take supper? Yeah, how was it? Good. And then she discovered that he took the soap instead of the... he didn't know the difference. So deacons don't pay any attention to these things. They have something more lofty than good tasting food in their life. Yitzock didn't care for the food and how it tastes. There is kedusha in the food to the extent of how it's prepared. If the mother, the wife, cooks food with good kavanas and she takes care that everything should be kosher, and she purchases her food in a way that she is 100% sure that it's kosher, and she prepares it that way, and especially if she has in mind that it should be nutrition for her husband and children, so that they should be able to serve Hashem and be healthy, especially if that food is prepared for Shabbos. And she says, we'll cover Shabbos Kodesh when she prepares the food. So, Kedusha goes into that food. While we're in Golus yet, the Tudor Beis Mikdash should be built up. The most holy food that we eat is matzah on Pesach. Why is matzah so holy? Because we prepare it with the preparation for the mitzvah. And when we bake it, when we knead it, when we bake it, when we cut off the wheat from the field, we say the Shem Matzah's Mitzvah. And we keep on repeating it. You ever see matzahs being baked? The Shem Matzah's Mitzvah. So that kedusha goes into the matzah. And then when you eat the matzah and you make the bracha over the matzah, the matzah is full of the munah. Matzah is a munah food. And whatever we eat at Pesach or Nacht by the Seder, especially in the times of the Korban Pesach, how did a Korban Pesach become Kadosh? By reciting the words L'Shem Pesach. This animal is a Pesach. It became holy. So holy that if somebody were to eat it outside of Yerushalayim, he's chayiv. He's supposed to eat it only in Yerushalayim, and only when he's tired. If he eats it when he's tabby, it's chayiv kadosh, because his words made it holy. It's made it hekdesh. And the shechita of the kayin and the zrikas adam, everything what was done, renders it a very holy food. So when somebody eats it, he absorbs a lot of kedusha. What happened was, I say that what happened was, all these years, since the day that Esau became an apikayrus, when in his 15th birthday, he was, so all these years, Yankov prepared food, maybe with Rivka's help, for Yitzock. And he used to tell his brother, Esau, what do you have to bother preparing the food for Daddy? I'll do it. You go and hunt. And with that, Yankov spared aggravation to Yitzock. Because if Esau would have shechted that animal, and he was a mummer, he was not a kaivis, it would have been kaiv. Yitzock, when such food would be brought in, Yitzock would immediately sense that it's kaiv. He wouldn't eat it. The Gemara says that by the big tzaddikim, even their animals don't eat what's not kosher. The donkey, the Pinchas ben Yair, didn't eat something which needed trumei semainsus med rabbanan. It refused to eat it. It's not supposed to eat. An animal is allowed to eat it, but not the Pinchas ben Yair's animal. So Koshkin a tzaddik like Yitzock, I've seen people, and I heard from them very wonderful stories about this, the way they saw tzaddikim. They actually saw how tzaddikim know what he can eat and what not. Meir Osavsky is one that used to it. This Chatzayah didn't come to us, but he always sings the Father. There was that iron voice, So his father is a good friend of mine. He's a big tzaddik, and he's living in Williamsburg. And I used to, when I was a young man, I used to go to his father with some other young men to learn from him, Avdus Hashem, how to learn correctly and daven correctly. So he was a Shlomo Chassid. The Shlomo Rebbe came to Eretz Yisrael. So many times of Meir Osavsky, Reb Leibel Osavsky, Meir's father, told me this story, and I know many such stories, but I'm just telling you one, that he saw with his own eyes. When the Shlomo Rebbe was in Eretz Yisrael, he came there for a visit, so he used to dine every night with his Chassidim at a different house. So once he told there was a certain Jew over there in Yerushalayim. He was a God-fearing person. He was a Yerei Shamayim with one chesed. In Yerushalayim, almost everybody wore a beard. And this person had no beard. All right, he could be an Alachid without a beard. But by Hasidim, they considered it even better if you do have a beard. If you shave correctly, up the halacha, there's nothing wrong with it. But it certainly gives more kedusha to have a beard. But in Yerushalayim, almost everybody wore a beard. That was about 50 or 60 years ago. So one day, the Shlomo Rebbe says to this Jew, this God-fearing man, let's call him Chaim Yankel. I don't know his name. We'll call him Chaim Yankel for convenience. So he says, Chaim Yankel, we're going to eat supper by you tonight. Oh, Chaim Yankel is very happy that he has the privilege of hosting the Rebbe and his Hasidim. And they came, and they served fish. This Chaim Yankel was a very poor man. And he sort of had his neighbors help him prepare these supper. He couldn't manage financially to do it himself. And they served the fish, and it was served in front of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe talks and talks and talks, and he doesn't eat. Then he says, and everybody else had fish, but they were waiting for the Rebbe first to partake. Then he says, Chaim Yankel, by Chassidim, it's a custom that everybody eats from one plate. Maybe you got a big plate. So Rabbi Yaakov, instead of answering, looks at another person who was nice-looking Jew with a long beard up to his belt, and he just looks at him. The Rebbe says, "Why are you looking? I don't want you to answer me." He says, "I'll tell you, Rebbe, I don't have enough plates to serve for the Rebbe and the Chassidim. I borrowed plates from that man. So if you ask me for a big plate, I look at him if he has a big plate to offer." The Rebbe says to that man, "So, these are your plates?" "Yes." "Are they ketayvot? Were they immersed in the mikveh?" So he says, "No, but some poskim say that you don't have to immerse plates in the mikveh." Which is true. It depends what kind of plates. So the Rebbe says, looking back at Chaim Yankov, you know the difference between you and that Jew? When you're going to come, after your 120 years, you're going to come into the Kisei HaKavod, to the Kisei HaMishpat. They're going to ask you, Jew, where is your beard? When he comes, they're going to say, beard, where is your Jew? He saw that it's not ketayvot. That's sad, because I put it out that it's not ketayvot. I know many such stories, but time is marking out. So, Yitzock wouldn't have eaten from that. Yaakov wanted to steer Yitzock from this aggravation. So Yaakov said, "You know what? I'll prepare the food." And of course, Yaakov prepared it with kedusha. I am reading the kind of mitzvah kibbutz, and perhaps Rivka helped him with that. And this is the food which Esau brought in to Yitzchak all these years. So Yitzchak tasted the food, and he sensed a big kedusha in that food. And he was wondering, what's with this boy? He goes around the whole day hunting, like a tramp, and doesn't learn. And I feel a big kedusha in the food which he prepares. What's going on over here? Oh, I know what's going on. This Esau is a concealed tzaddik. He's a lamed votnik, one of the 36 concealed tzaddik. He poses as somebody who isn't a tzaddik, as a hunter, but he really is a tzaddik, and a concealed tzaddik, somebody who doesn't show it, is even bigger than a revealed tzaddik. So that's why Yitzchak was more fond of Esau than of Yaakov. But there was a reason for that, because Yaakov really prepared that food. Along came a certain Pesach at night, when Rivka was told the nevuah that she must send Yaakov. She was a nevuah, she was a prophet. Rivka was told that she must send Yaakov to take the process. The Targum says it's the Feirish. Some of the nevuah, it was told to me by the nevuah, I want you to listen to me. You must listen to a navi. You have to obey. So that's why Yaakov was compelled to go in and take the Levites against his will. The Navi says so. So that day he didn't prepare the food to help out Esau, because it was against the Nevuah. He has to prepare the food and bring it in himself to Yitzchak. And he brought it in, and it was on the matzah which he baked, on the carbon Pesach which he prepared, was with so much kedusha that the Medrash says, Rashi brings it, that he felt that Yitzchak felt the Gan Eden is coming in. And Esau went hunting, and he couldn't find anything, because Chaim Yankov said. So he found a dying dog, and they prepared that for his father. And when he brought in his food, Yitzchak felt the Gehenna coming in. So that's what happened on that day. So the Targum and Rashi both say true, the same thing. The Targum says that he ate from his hunting, and he thought that there's Kedusha there. And Rashi says that he fooled his father because he brought him food which Yaakov prepared. So then the truth came to the surface. So Yitzock says, "Gam Baruch Yiyeh, Yaakov deserves the bracha, and righteously he has earned and accepted." So I'll finish off with a little story which emphasizes the point I brought out. There was a big Rebbe living about 150 years ago in Chatzkel, and Chassidim came to him for Shabbos, and it was one of the big Rabbanim came to him for Yom Tov, and it was Shabbos then, and cholent was served, and the cholent was so delicious, and this is not Philby never made such good cholent. So after Shabbos, he just mobilized his guts, and he went into the residence and said, "Please, Rabbi, can you give me the recipe for this cholent? My wife should make me the same cholent." He says, "Sure." And she gave him the recipe. He gives the recipe to his wife, and his wife makes the cholent. It wasn't that cholent, it was plain cholent. And that's what the housewives make. So she says the Rebbe withheld a certain ingredient, a secret ingredient she didn't tell me, which makes the cholent so delicious. Next time he was in Kuzma, he came in again to the Rebbe and says, "Rebbe, so my wife followed your recipe, and it wasn't the same cholent. Something is missing there." So she says, "Indeed, something is missing. You know what's missing? Every Friday, my husband, Petzadik, comes into the kitchen, takes a handful of beans, throws it into the pot, and says, 'L'kavod Shabbos Kodesh.' That you don't have. My husband took L'kavod Shabbos Kodesh. This is the ingredient that made the cholent so good. That's what the tzaddikim taste, and that's what they enjoy. I didn't say.
For a shir on the topic of explaining Yitzock's foundness of Esau and the meaning of Vayigdalu Hana'or, given Tafshim and press 1. For a shir on the topic of the Parsha of bracha ushers in Kislev, the month of bracha, the opposing philosophies of the Tzaddik and the Rasha, given Tafshin Samach,